Boundaries and limits, boundaries and limits, boundaries and limits. The parenting world is obsessed with boundaries and limits. And everywhere we go, people tell us that we need to set boundaries and limits. But in non-coercive collaborative parenting, we don't do that. We avoid it as much as possible. And my dear friend Rithia Lee, who's also a non-coercive parent, she reached out to me recently and asked me, hey, Vivek, tell me a little bit about your thinking around boundaries. And so when I was driving one day, I just left her a voice note, and I really liked it, so I want to share it with you. The sound quality is pretty terrible because I'm in the car, but I want to share it with you because I think it's some really good stuff. So please give it a listen and let me know what you think. And that's it. Peace out, everybody.
As far as boundaries go, it's one of my favorite topics, as you can imagine, because it's one of the first things out of people's mouths always. Got to set firm boundaries, because when people say that, it's all about controlling their kids, and then they say that the kids need this phrase got into the popular culture. The kids need boundaries, they crave boundaries, and it makes them feel safe. And yeah, and I mean, I always say that you definitely didn't get that idea from talking to a kid. I always tell parents, why don't you set a boundary with your kid that they don't want, and then as they're crying and resisting, just ask them, do you feel safe right now? And see what they say, because it's very unlikely that they feel safe in the midst of you restricting their freedom, restricting their autonomy, violating their consent. And then they're crying because of something that you're doing, and then you're empathizing with their pain. Do you really think that they feel safe in that moment? Do you think they feel well held and cared for in that moment? And people get really upset by that, of course, because, if you actually ask the kid, do you feel safe in that moment, they're not going to say yes. The thinking is, oh, but if kids have wide open choices and they can do whatever they want, it's too much for them. It's too much freedom, they can't handle it. So, let's say that's true. Even if that were true, I still would choose a non-coercive way of helping to meet that need. It doesn't mean that controlling kids with boundaries, non-consensual boundaries, is the only way to meet that need. It's a valid need. Let's say it's a valid need to be held, to have some structure, to know that your caregivers are safe and consistent and reliable. So let's say that is a real need. There's plenty of ways, with just a little creative imagination, there's plenty of ways we can meet those needs without imposing our power on our kids, and without making them feel bad about the process, and I think maybe for some kids it is a need, and for those kids, it's likely that when you say, hey kiddo, let's do dinner at 9 o'clock and then bed at 10 o'clock or whatever it is, they'll just say, okay, that sounds good, and then that's fine. But if they say dinner, then you got to go like, okay, wait a minute. And the other thing is that when we use boundaries on things like the second cookie, and homework and bedtime, and whatever else, and it's okay to be angry, but you can't talk like that. Whatever boundaries we're putting in, we're not, and I say this all the time, we're not actually teaching the value underneath. We're not helping the kids learn the value for themselves so that they can think about their choices and think about their impact and make choices based on, their own ethical sense, their own relationship to themselves, which is what I talked. My video today was about nourishing your kids' relationship to themselves. And so every single time we set a boundary, number one, we become unsafe to them. Number two, we aren't teaching them the values underneath. Even if we say it with our lips, the setting of the boundary is, to the kid's mind, a violent, oppressive act. So they're not taking in our lessons in a heartfelt way in those moments. And then in their memory of in their nervous system, in their memory, in their neural pathways, in their relational memory, all of that, they now have this clear picture that you could impose your power on them and cause them unhappiness at any point if you feel it's necessary. So then the kids have to protect themselves from you, and no matter how much you empathize afterwards, I always say you can't be the perpetrator and the empathizer. So no matter how much you empathize afterwards, if you're the one that intentionally caused the pain and caused it in a way that was avoidable and you could just not do it by just not doing it, then the kids know that. They know you're intentionally causing them pain and discomfort, and saying it's for their own good. So then it damages the relationship with you as well as their relationship with themselves. So it's just awful all around, and that's why I try my best to avoid it at all costs. And like I said, it doesn't mean that the parents who are thinking that way aren't recognizing that there's maybe some need that needs to be addressed, some structure that needs to be created, something. But the problem is, because for so many thousands of years, the only systems and structures we have as models are coercive ones, domination ones. Marshall Rosenberg calls them domination systems. And because of that, it's the only model that we have to go by. So when we try and meet the reasonable needs and situations that we come up with, our mind automatically defaults to that. So to change that default reaction, it's hard work. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of constant conscious self-examination, and watching our mindset, and watching how we perceive things, and the filters that our experiences go through in our minds, and adjusting those. Yeah. So that's like my intro to boundaries. Brownies, I almost said. My intro to boundaries. Let me know what you think.